Okay, so I have the carbs for my VN 750 and I'm going to take them apart, clean them, and jet them for the ear shave. So the first thing I'm going to do is separate them, and I'm going to start with the rear carb, and I can tell it's the rear carb because it has an R labeled there. The front one has an F. So I'm going to start with this half, and I'm going to start with the choke linkage. I'm going to remove that by pulling out this screw. So I can remove the collar from the starter plunger. Set this aside. Next thing I'm going to do is pull out the throttle link, which is this link that runs up here. Pull out that pin's cotter pin. So this cotter pin, I'm going to pull that guy out of there. Just like that. The next thing I'll do is separate the float chamber body from the carburetor body by taking out these three screws. Now this carburetor body should just slide off of here, just like that. And I got the two halves, and you can see the float, and I guess it'd be the bowl. I'll do the same with the front carb. Now normally this idle adjuster bracket is bolted on there, but it's already separated on mine. So I'll remove my linkage cotter pin there. And this plastic washer is behind that cotter pin. And then I'll separate it from the float body as well by removing the same three screws. And this front carb should slide off in the same manner. Just like that. Okay, next I'm going to remove my float pin. Now it says to use an awl. I'm just going to use a jeweler's screwdriver and pry up under there. Pop that guy out. I can pull the float out, and the float valve needle should come out too. You can remove the float valve needle and just inspect the rubber tip. Make sure there isn't any defects or cracks or cuts. Nothing that'll let fuel go by when it shouldn't. I'm going to remove the float valve body O-ring while I'm working in here, because I'm going to spray this all down with carb cleaner, and the carb cleaner isn't good for this rubber stuff. So I'll just take this out in the meantime. Now I'll do the same thing for the rear float. I'm going to start by taking apart my rear carburetor. First thing I'm going to take off is the coasting enricher. So one screw's pulled out already. Just remove this guy. And there's a spring pushing on this, so just be careful when you let it go. It doesn't get away on you. The cover, spring, and a little seal. Okay, so I'm just going to pull out this coaster enricher plunger. That's what I'm going to call it. It looks like that. And then in between this cap there's a little hole, and the carburetor there's a little O-ring with a flat edge. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is pop off this bottom cover. Just undo these two screws. Looks like somebody wrecked this one pretty good. I might need to drive that out with something. Someone had messed up the head of the screw pretty good, so I just had to tap my screwdriver into it with a hammer. I'll have to replace that one. So the screw's out of there. This bottom cover should come off. It's got an O-ring there. And then inside I have my main jet and my pilot jet that I can pull out of there. Okay, so with the proper size flathead screwdriver, I'm going to pull my jets out of there. So the first one that'll come out will be the bigger one, which is my main jet. Looks like that. And the smaller one, which is my pilot or slow jet. And it looks like that. The next thing I'm going to take off is this diaphragm cap on the top. Pull that off there slowly, make sure that spring doesn't get away. Pull the spring out of there, and your diaphragm, and slide. Should slide out of there with the needle in place. And I should be able to just push up on my needle and pull it out of the slide. Also a washer, little plastic washer. It's at the base of that needle at the bottom inside the slide. And one of the last things I'm going to do is pull this starter plunger out and just unscrew that with a 12mm socket. Pull that little plunger out of there, and I can pull this cap off my vacuum line. And that should pretty much be it for rubber stuff in the carb. So I should be able to go after this with some carb cleaner without wrecking anything. Forgot, one more thing that can come out is this idle screw. And you just want to look at the tip of that and make sure it's not scratched or wrecked in any way. And there's also a spring that'll come out with that as well. Okay, before I start taking apart this front carb, I just wanted to show something. I just wanted to show the action of the slides. When I pull it up, it kind of drops slowly because of the vacuum created by the diaphragm. Now, that wasn't happening on my rear carb, and I thought I had a tear in my diaphragm, but I think what actually happened was whoever installed it previously, whoever had taken it apart, had diaphragm kind of bunched up and it wasn't sealed on the edges, so there was air getting past. So they were probably seeing a lot of issues with the bike, and maybe that's why they tore it apart. I don't know, but I'll just make sure I seal that properly when I put that guy back in, and then it should work kind of like that when it's all back together. Okay, now I'll just take apart this front carburetor, very similar manner as the rear one. Washer goes right there. I just pried off the coasting enricher on this carb, and the O-ring it's supposed to go between this little orifice and this opening was missing. So I'm sure he the previous owner must have had a air leak there or something. No wonder he took it all apart. I don't didn't know what he's doing, obviously. Something I hadn't realized on the rear carburetor is when I pulled out the main jet, I had also pulled out the tube that it threads into. So I'll remove that one on here as well. So when I pulled this needle out of the front carb, I realized it didn't have the little plastic washer underneath of it that the rear carb had. So I'm guessing the previous owner had done his own tuning by putting this plastic washer in there. And I'm pretty sure he pulled this plastic washer from the linkage on the outside of the carb, the throttle linkage, because there was one missing on the one carb. It didn't have this plastic washer between the cotter pin and the linkage, so I guess that was his fix. He just stole this washer and stuck it in there. Okay, I'm going to clean all these parts up with some solvent and a scrub brush and a little compressed air through the holes and orifices. I'm going to be careful not to damage my diaphragms, my rubber parts, and then I'll be ready to put this back together. Something I forgot to show is this little washer and O-ring that fit down at the bottom of where the idle screw goes. So the washer goes in first, and then this little washer goes on. These were from the front carb, and then my back carb just had the O-ring. So I think whoever tinkered with it forgot to put the washer in last time.